Welcome back. All right, let's dive right into this explainer. So in our last session, we broke down the micronutrient needs of athletes, looking specifically at how electrolytes function on a cellular level. Now, since you're all already deeply familiar with macronutrients and metabolic pathways, you know exactly how the body fuels its engine. But today, we're going to look at how those electrolytes power the body's internal radiator. And trust me, keeping that radiator functioning is just as biologically critical as fueling the engine itself. But before we get into the nitty-gritty clinical strategy of fluid management, we really have to establish the stakes here. What actually happens when that radiator breaks down during intense exertion? Proper hydration isn't just about feeling good out there. It's fundamentally about optimizing your metabolic performance, delaying physiological fatigue, and most importantly, preventing some highly dangerous heat-related illnesses. So today, we're treating hydration as a strict clinical strategy. We're going to cover 1. Heat illnesses and performance, 2. The clinical hydration timeline, 3. Sports drinks versus water, and finally 4. The very real danger of overhydration.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, heat illnesses and performance. Let's take a look at how a failing fluid strategy leads to an escalating series of medical emergencies. When an athlete's fluid and electrolyte losses outpace their intake, the body can rapidly progress through a terrifying sequence. It usually starts with exercise-associated muscle cramps, those involuntary, super painful spasms you often see athletes get during or after heavy exercise. If the radiator isn't replenished, this escalates to heat exhaustion, which is characterized by intense systemic weakness, dizziness, heavy sweating, and dark urine. But the absolutely crucial point here is the final stage, heat stroke. This is the most dangerous, potentially fatal stage. Heat stroke is uniquely identified by a core body temperature over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, rapid breathing, confusion, and a highly dangerous lack of sweating. Basically, the body has literally run out of fluid to cool itself. Recognizing that sudden shift from heavy sweating and exhaustion to absolutely no sweating in heat stroke is a critical, life-saving clinical skill.
Moving on to section 2, the clinical hydration timeline. Now that we deeply understand the risks of an empty radiator, we have to recognize that hydration is a continuous cycle. You don't just chug water on game day, right? You start days in advance. In the preparation phase, athletes must aggressively consume adequate fluids and completely avoid alcohol, which, as you know, acts as a diuretic and actively contributes to dehydration. The timeline moves right up to the hours before, the exact fluid intake during the event, and that critical recovery window afterward. The big takeaway here is the sheer precision of the clinical math. We aren't just guessing anymore. 4 hours before an event, an athlete should be consuming 5 to 7 milliliters of fluid per kilogram of body weight. If 2 hours before the event, their urine is still dark or absent, they need to add another 3 to 5 milliliters per kilogram. The absolute visual goal before even crossing the starting line is clear yellow urine. Then, for maintenance during exercise, the target is 0.4 to 0.8 liters, which is roughly 14 to 28 ounces per hour. So you're looking at taking in about 3 to 7 ounces every 15 minutes just to keep those metabolic pathways functioning optimally. But the math doesn't stop when the whistle blows. After the exercise, athletes undergo a weight check. Ideally, they shouldn't be losing more than 2% of their total body weight. And for every single kilogram of body weight they did lose, they actually need to drink up to 1.5 liters of fluid. That is 150% of the lost weight. Think of it like paying back a fluid loan with a really high interest rate. The body needs that surplus because you're going to continue losing sweat and urine during that immediate recovery phase. All right, section 3, sports drinks versus water. Let's evaluate the actual tools we use to hit those strict fluid targets. Now, plain old water is the absolute gold standard for short, low-intensity bouts of exercise under 60 minutes. No question. But sports drinks, they provide highly calibrated physiological advantages for long-haul endurance, high-intensity activities, or events in excessive heat and humidity. They help maintain blood volume, they actually stimulate thirst so the athlete remembers to keep drinking, and they actively enhance the absorption of water in the gut. Notice this Goldilocks zone of carbohydrate concentration. Since you already understand how carbohydrates are metabolized, you know they provide rapid energy. But the concentration is literally everything here. Hitting that 6 to 8% carbohydrate slice, represented right here around the 7% mark, is the optimal sweet spot for absorption without slowing down gastric emptying. Pushing that sugar content past 10% will almost certainly trigger debilitating intestinal discomfort.
The gut simply cannot process a highly concentrated sugar solution while blood flow is being aggressively diverted to working muscles.
Which brings us to section 4, the danger of overhydration. We've talked extensively about the dangers of an empty radiator, but there's an inverse risk in sports nutrition that is just as critical to grasp. Believe it or not, it is entirely possible to drink too much water. When an athlete takes in massive amounts of plain water without replacing electrolytes, they risk severely diluting those crucial blood sodium levels we studied previously. This triggers a dangerous condition called hyponatremia, otherwise known as water intoxication, and the symptoms are alarming: severe headaches, confusion, bloating, vomiting, and in extreme cases, even seizures. So, how do we prevent hyponatremia? Well, the fluid strategy has to remain highly personalized. Athletes must match their intake to their individual sweat and sodium losses, rather than just blindly chugging as much water as humanly possible. For athletes who know they have a high sweat sodium loss, it's absolutely imperative that sodium is consumed during the exercise, not just after. To really anchor how easily this physiological balance can fail, even in highly trained professionals, just look at the data from the 116th Boston Marathon back in 2012. Temperatures unexpectedly spiked to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And the result? Over 2,100 runners required medical treatment for dehydration and heat exhaustion. It is a stark, real-world reminder that extreme environmental conditions can completely shatter an unprepared hydration strategy, regardless of how perfectly you fueled your metabolic pathways. So as we wrap up this explainer and you get ready to explore ergogenic aids in your next session, I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. If elite, world-class athletes can succumb to heat and fluid imbalances, is your own clinical fluid strategy truly precise enough to keep your radiator running when the pressure's on? Something to think about as you continue exploring how to optimize human performance. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.